The show starts in 3, 2, 1, go.
What is going on, CaneSport? Good morning to you all. It is Izubee Charles, joined by Steven Wagner, and welcome to Good Morning CaneSport. It is Monday, November 18th, and we'd like to thank all of you for starting your day off with us. A ton of Miami Hurricanes news this week as they are set to take on Wake Forest for their Week 13 matchup. As we all know, last week the Hurricanes had a bye week and they're back to getting things rolling down there in Coral Gables. Later this morning, we'll be down at the coach's press conference, so make sure to check out our stories of what Coach Mario Cristobal, offensive coordinator Shannon Dawson, and defensive coordinator Lance Gidry had to say about it. Steven, football is back. Miami comes in as a heavy favorite against Wake Forest. I believe already a 3-touchdown favorite, according to one of those many sports books. Just, what are your thoughts about, the Canes headed, to this week against Wake Forest with their home closer?
Whenever I saw the initial spread, like you said, it's already over 3 touchdowns. My initial thought was that I think this is going to be a game that could play out a lot like the Duke game. Miami gets into, what looks like it could be the makings of a shootout a little bit early. A Wake Forest offense that's been, okay, can score points, matches a bad Miami defense. They get a few scores early in the game. Maybe at some point in the first half, they briefly have a lead. But a Wake Forest offense that can't stop anyone against a Miami offense that can't really stop anyone either, but at least has more talented players. Miami's going to have more playmakers. I think Wake Forest runs out of plays to be made. I've got Miami definitely winning this game. And I do think they cover, but I think it could be a backdoor cover situation. I could see Miami maybe being up 14 in the fourth quarter. Then they go ahead and score another touchdown to make it 21 and kind of stretch the lead. And, then maybe Wake kind of folds around like the 8-minute mark or so and Miami gets one more insurance touchdown. I think it's going to be a little bit of a backdoor cover.
Yeah, going to be interesting to see if this defense, has improved since that Georgia Tech game, because boy, oh boy, did they get ran all over, up there in Atlanta last weekend. So we'll have to see what, those guys say today. Like I said, we have the chance to speak with Coach Cristobal, Coach Gidry, kind of pick their brains, see what they're saying coming off that bye week. So just make sure to stay tuned on the site later today for those stories. And, we also have a great story on the site. A Pro Football Focus, as we always do, sent Matt to the lab, and he dug in and took a real good look at both the offensive and defensive performances up to this point. So make sure to check that out. He takes a look at some of the underlying issues and kind of where things could potentially be corrected for the Canes. So make sure to check that out. As always, when Steven and I are doing the show, it will be heavily recruiting focused. So we have a ton of recruiting juice for you guys. Obviously, last week, Miami landed Hayden Lowe, the 2025 4-star defensive end that was previously committed to USC. Steven, a few days out from that commitment, we've had the chance to kind of rack through things and, look at it, from a different perspective. Just, what are your thoughts on that Hayden Lowe flipping? Why do you think Miami was able to pull, the Cali kid to Coral Gables?
Man, at the end of the day, I really do think it was just kind of persistence. I really do think that this was a recruitment that was always kind of built to be one that Miami would kind of end up winning over the long run. A situation where Miami kind of chips away, and then finally they put themselves in a position where they can get a flip. Miami's recruiting approach and the effort that they make in recruiting is superior to the effort that USC makes in recruiting, straight up. Miami I think Miami recruits at a higher level. I think they recruit with a much more intense focus. I think that they are incredibly more persistent. And at the end of the day, I really do think that they just want it more. They really do want this guy more. And I think Miami just being able to show that over the span of about, 5 months since he committed to USC back in June, Miami being able to show that over such an extended period of time, at some point, Hayden just kind of felt like, man, Miami does kind of want me more than USC. I think that ended up paying off in the long run. I mean, I know that, in today's age of college football, There are always things that matter more than just your relationship with the coaching staff. But here, I really, really do think it was a case of just Miami being extremely persistent and, Mario Cristobal, quite frankly, just kind of doing what Mario Cristobal does. I mean, he's so good at this that he's making a living off of it. He's so good at this that he makes millions and millions of dollars at it. And, you can say what you will about, his game day decisions and, how he handles the X's and O's and the schematics and, the guy who he is on game day. But there's one thing that you absolutely cannot take away from him, and that is his ability to acquire talent. I don't think any head coach in the country does it quite like Mario Cristobal, and he's showing it.
Yeah, we had a conversation on the message board yesterday, kind of just talking about Mario Cristobal, and I called him, one of, if not the best closer when it comes to, recruiting down the stretch with national signing day a few weeks out. And, someone on the boards called him the Mariano Rivera of closers. And I was like, hey, that's a great comparison because, when it comes down to the nitty gritty, I can't really think of another coach that I would want recruiting for my program. Obviously we cover Miami, so we know a little bit more, than the average person about their approach and, how, they stay consistently, connected with these recruits, even though they venture off to different programs. But at the end of the day, they always circle back. And, that's a perfect example with Hayden Lowe, like you mentioned. Miami just wanted, Hayden Lowe more than USC did. And he kind of mentioned that. He said throughout the process, sometimes he felt that love from USC, sometimes he did it. Miami's been there the whole time, and, it led to his eventual commitment to the Cane. So huge win for, Coach Cristobal and those guys on the recruiting trail. And, one of the many flip targets that they want to add to that 2025 class before it's all said and done. Last time I checked, the Hurricanes are sitting inside the top 10 now with the number 9 class in the country, according to On3's team recruiting ranking. So, hey, they're on the right path to that third consecutive top 10 class. And they've got some more guys that they're looking to flip, kind of staying on the topic of Big Ten defenders they're looking to flip. Yesterday made some noise when Steve Wiltfong, dropped the Fong bomb with TJ Alford, who he predicted to flip to the Miami Hurricanes. This is a guy that's been to Hard Rock Stadium twice this year, a guy that, like Hayden Lowe, committed to a Big Ten program, but Miami remained persistent in that recruitment. Steven, just want to get your thoughts on kind of the TJ Alford situation as we're here on this Monday, kind of waiting to see if he does flip that commitment from the Buckeyes to the Hurricanes.
So nothing official yet, but right now I am leaning toward him flipping to Miami. I haven't entered a pick or anything like that, but I definitely am leaning toward him going ahead and flipping to the Hurricanes. Miami's made a really, really strong effort for him this fall. I mean, Miami really has upped its game this fall after, quite frankly, things communication just kind of slowed during the summer for one reason or another, and I'm not really sure why, because TJ always kind of maintained a certain level of interest in Miami. And, we said whenever he committed to Ohio State back in March, we said this is going to be a name that you should keep an eye on, that I would definitely expect Miami to circle back to. I wouldn't expect this to be the end of his recruitment. And TJ even said at the time whenever he committed, this is a really hard decision, but there are going to be a few schools that I'm still willing to consider. There's still going to be a few schools that I'm going to keep it, that I'm going to stay in touch with. Miami is going to be one of them. It always kind of looked like Miami was kind of that number 2 school for him. This fall, I think, kind of reaffirmed that whenever he got down to Hard Rock a couple times. He did end up going ahead and taking an official visit to Florida State, but I've always kind of felt like Miami was his number 2 school. And I think it's very, very clear now that Miami kind of was like the next option for him if things didn't pan out with Ohio State. Hence all the buzz that we are seeing right now around the idea of him potentially coming to Miami. I think that this is first off, he has a bunch of recruiting connections he has a bunch of connections to Miami, I should say. He's got several friends committed to Miami, some guys that he played 7-on-7 football with. Chris Ewald is one of them. The guys who play on the DEF CON 7-on-7 football team. He's got a bunch of those guys. Darion Coleman is another one who's committed to Miami, the quarterback in the 26th class. His dad is a Miami Hurricanes fan, and he's originally from Miami. And that relationship with James Laurinaitis up at Ohio State has been really, really tight. But Miami's doing a really good job right now. I still do think that something could end up happening.
Yeah, sticking on the topic of linebackers in that 2025 class, I want to talk about a guy that is in the Hurricanes, 2025 group, and that is Gavin Nix. So you had the chance to catch up with him recently, had a, talk about his recruitment, where things stand. Our program's still pushing for Gavin Nix, kind of, what's the latest in his recruitment?
Yeah, Gavin's locked in with Miami. I'm expecting him to be a Hurricane. There were some other schools that were still reaching out, that were still kind of poking at him earlier in the year. Michigan was one of them. Oregon was another one. They were kind of, trying to get a feel for what their chances were. But ever since Gavin got down for the Florida State game, I mean, man, he's been locked in with Miami. I don't think he's going anywhere. I fully expect him to be a Hurricane. That is not a recruitment that I'm worried about at all. As far as I'm concerned, you can circle him. You can circle him on Miami's recruiting board and say he is solid. I really don't see any reason why he would not sign with Miami on December 4th.
Yeah, that seems to be the consensus. We've talked to a handful of the 2025 commits, and most of the guys that we're able to speak with are all saying, hey, I'm locked in with the Canes. This season has only furthered my belief in Coach Cristobal and those guys. And, December 4th should be a very, very exciting day for those guys out of Coral Gables as they work to ink, another top 10 class, like you mentioned, would be their third consecutive. But, like I keep saying, they are trying to add more prospects to that unit. And Steven, interesting guy that, we've talked to a few times, committed to Oregon right now, and that is 5-star wide receiver Dallas Wilson. On Friday, before he made that trip up to Gainesville to watch the LSU game, he said that the Gators and the Hurricanes were kind of fighting that number 2 spot. Now he says Florida has moved up ahead of Miami and solidified themselves at that number 2 program. He's going to take an official visit with Florida, this upcoming weekend for their matchup against Ole Miss. I know Miami would love to keep, Dallas in that Sunshine State, bring him to South Florida, but just hearing him say, hey, the Gators are the clear-cut number 2 now, and he's taking that OV with them this weekend. Just what are your thoughts on, where things stand with him and, Miami's chances of flipping at the end of the day?
Man, I'll be honest. I think he's feeling a little bit of the mojo and the vibes that they have in Gainesville right now. I mean, Billy Napier, being announced that he was going to be retained, and obviously, they went out and they got killed by Texas that weekend, but they didn't really have DJ Lagway. They had some other dudes hurt. Kind of a sleepy game to get up for. I mean, going from Gainesville to Austin to play at 11 a.m. Kind of weird vibes for Florida, but I think Dallas getting to the LSU game this weekend, I think that really helps kind of, change the vibes around a little bit. I think that he's able to kind of ride that post-visit high right now. I think that I personally think that that's one of the reasons why, we're seeing so much positive buzz around Florida is because, he's leaving Gainesville after watching them beat LSU for the first time in forever. Finally having some good energy walking out of the swamp. Florida finally beats a top 25 team. They get their 6th win, or they put themselves in position to get their 6th win. It looks like they'll be able to go to a bowl game. DJ Lagway plays well, and it looks like DJ Lagway's happy, and that everyone's kind of, saying, okay, maybe it might not be so bad after all. I definitely think that that's kind of the reason why we're seeing all this positive buzz around Florida. I think they're just kind of riding the vibes. I do think that a post-visit high will die out eventually. And the official visit that he's going to take to Florida next weekend, that's something that he's been having his eye on for a while. It's not like he went to LSU or he went to the LSU game and then all of a sudden thought, man, I have to go take an official visit. No, he was looking at this for a long time. He was looking at getting down to Florida for an official visit for a while. He was actually supposed to go in the summer, but he ended up canceling that for a 7-on-7 tournament or to go play in a 7-on-7 tournament instead. I really do think that if Miami really wants to push hard, they can totally reclaim that number 2 spot from Florida. But I definitely think Florida has the advantage right now of having just hosted him on campus.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% with that post-visit high because, if you know Dallas, he's a very, very happy and excited kid to speak with. Awesome, football player, awesome kid on the field. So I definitely can see where, seeing that big win in the swamp over the Tigers was something that raises at level with the Gators. So we'll have to see, how this one ends out. I know if you're a Miami recruiting fan, you're going to be rooting for Ole Miss to smack the Gators, this upcoming weekend to kind of maybe swing that momentum back to Miami's favor. But I want to talk about another wide receiver who's also in the Hurricanes 2025 class, Malachi Tony. This past Friday, had the chance to watch him in his opening round, playoff game. Although, he hurt his ankle, wasn't able to finish the game, was out by, halftime. He did break, American Heritage's single career receiving record in just 3 years. As we all know, he were classified from the 2026 to 2025 class. And hearing that, obviously, American Heritage is one of the best programs, not only in South Florida in the country, multiple guys in the NFL right now, multiple active guys, in the league. So hearing a guy that is supposed to be a junior breaking that record in 3 years is something that I was really impressed about. Steven, we've talked a ton about Malachi Tony. We've seen him a ton, over these last 3 years. Is first off, hearing, him break that record at a school like American Heritage, what are your thoughts on just, his body of work as a wide receiver as well as he get closer, to sign with Miami?
I think that the comp to Xavier Restrepo only gets bigger, only gets better and better. Kid goes ahead and breaks a receiving record at American Heritage, a really prestigious program that's produced a lot of elite skill talent. A bunch of future 4-star and 5-star guys, guys that would go on to have lengthy careers in the NFL. And Malachi Tony breaks it. I mean, that's not that dissimilar to Xavier Restrepo being the one who breaks Miami's receiving record at the University of Miami. Miami, a school that has produced a lot of really, really elite special receivers that are kind of synonymous with college football and guys that would go on to have really special careers in the NFL. I mean, guys who would go on to be NFL Hall of Famers. And who holds the record? Xavier Restrepo. That's kind of the way that I feel about Malachi Tony. You talk all about you talk about all the great names that have come out of American Heritage. Who holds the receiving record? Malachi Tony. And, we still don't know what Restrepo's NFL career is going to come to, just like we don't know what Tony's college career is going to come to. But we can still marvel at the fact that is very, very remarkable that their names are going to be up in the rafters with those guys. And I think that the comp between Tony and Restrepo is only getting better and better.
Yeah, a guy that, has been making plays since he first stepped foot on that football field at American Heritage. And, a great honor to break that record in just 3 years. And, when he first came into Miami, I spoke with Mike Smith and just said, hey, what about Malachi Tony stands out to you the most? He said, listen, this kid as a sophomore has the best hands that's ever come through this program. And I was like, ever? He's like, ever. Like, the kid is different. So hearing that from the coach, as a sophomore, and then him breaking that record kind of, tells you, what that young man is all about. He's going to take his official visit to Miami this upcoming weekend for that Wake Forest game. And, all signs right now are pointing towards him signing with the Hurricanes. I know he had the little situation where he decommitted and then came back to the class. But, right now I think he will sign with the Canes. But I wouldn't be surprised if another program kind of, enters the mix late and maybe makes things interesting. But right now, all signs are pointing with him signing with the Hurricanes. So make sure to check out that update that we have on him and, all the other ones that we have on site from this past weekend. Also have an Inside the Lines with 2025 Miami commit Brock Schott, a tight end that, Steven, you've been very, very, very high on for a very long time. And, I joked around with him, during the interview and said, hey, man, has the Hurricanes talked about, playing a little bit defensive end for it? He mentioned, hey, Cody Waddell is keeping me as far as he can away from Jason Taylor. They want him to be solely a tight end at Miami. Obviously, that's where they're recruiting him. But just what are your thoughts about Brock Schott, as a prospect and just, his fit in Miami when it's all said and done?
He is without a doubt in my mind the most athletic, pure athlete that Miami has in this year's football class. And the way that Miami has kind of approached recruiting, especially at the tight end position, is, hey man, if you can give me an awesome athlete, we will figure out what to do with him. Let's go get really, really good football players. Let's get guys who are these just kind of freaks. And then once we get them on campus, we'll have a very, very good problem to have. I think that that's kind of one of the deals with Brock Schott because, he's not necessarily, like a clear cut, he's not really a clear cut tight end. He's not really the stereotypical tight end that you think of. He's much more of an H-back. But I think that he, quite frankly, could be a more athletic version of Elijah Lofton, who, we all think, he's definitely had some good contributions this year. I think he's only going to get better. I think he's going to be a name that Hurricane fans are really going to know later in his career. I think that Brock Schott is basically a more athletic version of him. I mean, there are so many things that you can possibly do with Brock. I had a chance to watch him work out once over the summer. And I mean, man, this kid has like zero fat on his body. He is pure raw muscle. He tests extremely well in a combine setting, really, really good hands, willing blocker. But I think he's just a dude who is a natural mismatch problem for anyone at the college level. I think you can do so many things with him. I think you can line him up in the backfield. I think you can put him at fullback. I think you can put him at H-back. I think you can split him out wide. I think you can put him in line. I think you can have him in there in some split back sets where he would maybe take the place of a second running back. I think you could have him in multiple tight end sets where maybe he's actually lined up as the H-back. I think you could split him out wide. I think that, hell, I even think that he could be a pretty effective receiver. I just think that there are so many unique possibilities for a guy like him that when you get a dude like him, as a staff, you're really allowed to get creative with what you want to do. And that's whenever coaches, they start to kind of get to have fun with the X's and O's whenever they're, whenever they're in the coach's room looking at a drawing board on Monday morning and trying to figure out what they want to do in a given week. I love Brock Schott. I think he's going to be really good.
Yeah, 6'4", over 215, 220 pounds. And if you turn on his tape, you can see why a lot of programs around the country, were after him for a very long time before he chose the Canes. And during that interview, we kind of talked about, what factored into that decision. He just said, hey, every time he came to Miami, he felt that family atmosphere. Coach Cody Waddell did an excellent job of recruiting him, alongside Coach Cristobal, and that eventually won his commitment for the Canes. And a guy that's been very, very solid on that pledge. I don't think he's taken any visits elsewhere throughout the process. Hasn't really entertained any other programs, as well too. So a guy that, like a lot of these 2025 guys who I, 100% expect to ink with the Hurricanes on December 4th. And that tight end room, man. Steven mentioned Elijah Lofton, a very, very crafty guy who, in last year's cycle, a lot of people on that Miami staff said, hey, he's the best pure football player in that 2025 group. And we're seeing what he's doing in multiple positions, for the Hurricanes, scoring touchdowns as a fullback, as a tight end, even took, a pooch kick, almost to the house, got it to the 50-yard line. So a ton of talent and a ton of gadget guys that Coach Waddell will have in that 2020 or in that tight end room, moving forward with Brock Schott joining in that 2025 class. So make sure to check out that Inside the Lines if you haven't. We also have updates on 2025 commits Dante Simpson and Chris Ewald out of Sean Madonna. So make sure to check out on those local guys and, what they're saying ahead of signing day. And, last week, like we mentioned, Hurricanes were on a bye week. Coach Matt Merritt did not waste, any of the time during that week. He offered a handful of running backs in the 2026 class. Steven, you had the chance to talk to a few of those guys. Just, quick thoughts on, Matt Merritt continuing to dish out, offers for that 2026 running back class.
I've been really impressed with the job that Merritt has done on the recruiting trail. I think he's been a very, very willing and eager recruiter. He takes every opportunity that he can to get out to games, to get out on the trail, really just to do whatever he can to, start, building these bonds with some of these guys in the class. He's got a bunch of very strong ties to the Tampa area. He was at USF before this, and he's recruited a bunch of really good Tampa area backs. Miami is in very, very promising position with a lot of guys in the 2026 class. And of course, I think part of that absolutely has to be because Miami has already, locked everything up in the 25 class. Gerard Pringle ended up being the only back that Miami decided to take in this year's cycle, not expecting Miami to go for any other back in the class. And Pringle has been, so solid with Miami for so long that, the staff was kind of able to say, hey, we've got Gerard Pringle all locked up. Let's start making a run some of these 26 guys, kind of similar to what we saw with the tight ends. They got Brock Schott locked up very early. They got Luka Gilbert locked up very early. Miami was able to say, hey, man, we're good on tight ends in this class. Let's start making a run some of these 26 guys. Let's see if we can't get, some really, really elite guys in 26 and start diverting some of those resources there, knowing that we've got the tight ends that we want and we've got the running backs that we want. I've been really, really impressed by Matt Merritt. He's been a very good recruiter.
Yeah, never too early to, get in with those guys who are going to be, guys that we're talking about a lot in a few months. So Matt Merritt, Coach Waddell doing an excellent job recruiting ahead. So, shout out to those two position coaches, down there. Cole was really doing their thing. And, before we wrap up today as well, I want to shout out to, both the men's and women's basketball program. Miami's men's team defeated Copen State by 30 yesterday, off to a great start, 3-0. I know they haven't played, anyone that is, worthwhile, but they're doing a great job, with those guys. And Coach Larinaga looking like they'll bounce back from a very, very disappointing season last year. And shout out to the women's basketball program as well. 3-0, just had a huge win, against the Florida Gators in Gainesville. Haley Cavendish scored 29 points. Both the Cavendish twins combined for 40 points. So kudos to those guys, to those girls. My apologies, and what they're doing 3-0 this year. So want to give them a shout out as well. But that is all that we have for this morning. Thank you for tuning in. For Stephen Wagner, I'm Izubee Charles. Make sure to stay on the site later this morning as we check in with the Canes coaches. But for all that is all that we have. Once again, thank you for tuning in. Stephen Wagner, I'm Izubee Charles. You guys have a great rest of your day now. Bye.